All right, Jen. I think we'll go ahead and get started. Um, Good afternoon, everybody. I want to thank you for attending STCR's Lunch and Learn training series. My name is Farrell McKenna, and I'm the head of operations here at STCR. And I'm joined today by Jen Fraley-Custer. Jen is one of our technical support specialists. I'm sure many of you here on the call are very familiar with Jen. She conducts a lot of our training sessions, and she's been with us for about 15 years at the company. So at STCR, we've been supporting the technology needs of grocers for over 56 years. And we believe very strongly that ongoing training is essential to continuing to meet the ROI targets you have for your point of sale system. Ever since the beginning of the year, we put together this monthly webinar series to help address and provide ongoing training on some key areas within the SMS solution. These always happen toward the end of every month, and we actually put together the list of topics based on some of our top called in topics on the help desk. So that's what helped us build out our session since the beginning of this year. Today, we're going to be going over best practices on delete batches. I'd like to welcome everyone to submit questions along the way as Jen is doing her presentation. Feel free to submit them through the Q&A function within Zoom, and we'll save up those questions for the end when we have a dedicated Q&A session. So today's session is being recorded as well. We've recorded each one of our webinars since the beginning of this year, and it'll be available to you after the fact. We'll email it to you after the session is over. And I'll open up a quick Q&A session after we get started. And if you don't mind, please feel free to respond. I might do a couple of those polls throughout today's session. So we'd appreciate if you take a second to just respond to those. But without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and hand this over to Jen now.
Thank you, Farrell. As he stated, today we're going to be going over delete batches. This is a common question that comes up on our help desk, either specifically about delete batches or how to delete a large amount of items at once. So that is what the delete batch process is for. Before I jump into that, that is a very specific type of batch. So I'm just going to go over some best practices for batches in general, and then go more specifically into the delete batches, as best practices for batches in general also apply to just doing the delete batches. So I have up on the screen here the default batch screen for SMS Pro. The way that we go in to create batches in SMS Pro is utilizing this screen. And what we suggest, and as a best practice when you're creating batches, is that you want to make the batches as specific as you can, and this helps you in organizing the batches. So what I mean by that is, if you're coming in to create a batch, if you're familiar with the process, you use the screen and you're going to hit the plus button, and it's going to give you a list of different batches that you can create from here. Best practice is to try to keep the batches specific. So if you're creating a sales batch, you're going to want to create a sales batch, a TPR batch, cost batch, depending on what kind, and allowance, discount. You want to keep them as specific as possible. Why we list this as a best practice is that it helps you organize the batches better, and it helps you with any issues that may arise when you're applying the batch. It helps us be able to drill down into what the specific issue was. Also, if you're creating a batch, which I will get into, an open batch with multiple different changes happening, a POS change, a price change, a cost change, you are limited to one date. Batches are date driven, so you are limited to one date that all those changes will occur. That could work for you in certain circumstances, absolutely. I'm not saying don't use the open batch, but if you are trying to build a specific batch for a specific date for a reason, it's always better to go with a specific kind. And I'm going to build a couple just to kind of go over some different ways that you can utilize this. So I'm just going to go ahead and say I'm going to create a future sale batch. It's a pretty common one that you're going to create a sales batch. You pick your type. We're just going to say this is our test sales batch. And then you can change your dates. Always best to change your dates at the beginning. You can change them later, but it's always best to change them at the beginning. By default, we go into the next week. The batch is always going to start on the day of the week that the system is programmed for. So in this circumstance, my lab is set to start the week on Sunday, so it's going to the next Sunday and it goes to the end of the next week. So if you need to make any changes, you can type it in, or you can go ahead and double click in it and pull up the calendar and change the date right here to whatever date. If maybe you're going to the week after that, so you just want to push it to the next week. And then you can go ahead and start creating your batch. If you have the items grouped together in some way, it does make it easier to pull them into the batch. So what does that mean? If you're familiar with the filter, you can come down here. You can create a batch by vendor code for this, if you have a specific vendor ID that you're going to put on sale, a subdepartment, a category, family code, report code. If you have them grouped together and that group of items is going to go on sale, that would be an easy way to pull them all into the batch all at once. If you don't have that, there's always the way you can do it by description. So I'm going to go ahead and come in here and I'm going to make a batch for my Gatorade items. I'm just going to go by description, hit my play, and it's going to bring them up into the browsers down here. And I can go start adding these items to the sales batch. As you go through them, you have to pick the specific table. This is what that specific batch process does, is it has you have to pick the right table. So if I'm in a sales batch, I can't do a future price. If I'm in a sales batch, I can't do a future cost. I can only do a future sale. And that's what I mean by being very specific. So if I come up here to do a future regular price, it's going to give you an error message. This makes it easier that everything is grouped together when you're executing the batches and running any reports on the batch. Another way that you can group together items is you can also have them linked together by a light code or something like that. So in this case right here, I have some of my Gatorades are together by a light code. So if I want to add these items to my batch, I can come up, I hit plus. They're already in a different sales batch, but I can come up and hit plus because that's for this current week. I want to put it on sale for the next week. Hit plus. I'm going to say I'm going to put it on sale. It's $1.39. I'm going to put it on sale for $1.20. And when I hit save, since there's a light code in there, it's going to try to pull in all the other items that have a light code. This is another great way to group together your items if you want to put them on sale together. The one thing I do like to make sure that customers are aware of when you're using this is if you're using this in regular item maintenance, you can just hit yes to this and it will go ahead and change it on the live price record. With the fact that you're in a batch screen, you have to make sure that you're not just hitting yes and leaving it with the default of change. You have to come down here and you have to do create/change. The reason being is that you are creating a new table for this item. It's a future sales table. It's not affecting the live price table, so it's not just a change. You actually have to create a table. If you just do change, it will only change this one item. It will not create the table for all the other items with the light code. So it kind of eliminates having the light code as a way to link together items for this circumstance. So you have to change this to create change. You do create and change, you do yes, and it will go ahead and create that table for anybody that has that same light code. So you can see I had 3 items with that light code. And they all are pulling in that new price of $1.20. It created the table. You can then go ahead and add any other items that need to be added into this batch. Various ways. You don't have to just do it by point of sale or description. Like I said, you can go ahead if you have a different family code that's going to be on sale that same date. You have report code. If you have individual items, you can always do main code and just type them in. You do have the ability to do this on the PDA and with M4 if you want to create a batch with that. Usually if you're putting a large amount of items on sale together, there's generally going to be, you want to make sure you hit all the barcodes. If you're using the handheld and you're going out and creating a batch, if you happen to be out of stock of the item, you could miss something. So if you're using the back office, you can sort by these different ways and you can make sure that you're getting everything. So once you have everything that you want to have in here, you can then go and execute the batch. Just to go into execute in store, and you're going to have your list of batches. This is why having all of those items and having it sorted by the different batch type makes it a little bit easier to see what you're executing. One thing I do like to show is you can print a report before the batch is run to make sure that you have all the items that you would like to have in there. So if you come into this one that we just created with the test sale, you can hit view, and this will give you a nice report. It's going to show you the active price. It's going to show you the start and the stop time. It's going to show you the new price. So that way you have that information. In reviewing this, you could find that perhaps there's an item that should not have been in here, and you can go back and correct that. Perhaps you notice that you're missing a barcode before you execute the batch. You can try to fix those issues beforehand. This is going to be more important when we go into the delete batches, because running this report will give you the information before you delete the items. So going back to our batch maintenance screen, which is under future batches, you can go up and pull up that same batch, and you can go ahead and add more items before it's executed or delete any items. To specifically go into delete batches, since that's the focus of this webinar, that is a batch type like we made before. When you come up under here, it's the very bottom option with delete batch. This is going to do a clean delete of the items in the system. What does that mean is there is a lot of tables that tie to each item. And when you're deleting an item, you want to make sure that you're deleting all the tables. If not, then you can have what we call orphan tables. So if you go and delete an item improperly without deleting all of the different tables that need to be, you could have an orphan cost table. So you just have a cost table sitting out there with no item attached to it, or a point of sale table or a price table. It just creates clutter in the database, and you don't really want to have that in the system. So this is a way to make sure that you're deleting all the tables linked to an item properly with a delete batch. You're just going to come in, you're going to do delete batch. Again, give it a descriptor. And then you have a start and an end date. And with a delete batch, there is no end. When you delete the item, it's gone. So the end date really does not matter in this case. You can clear it out or just leave it in there if you'd rather. The start date does matter, because this is the date that the items are going to be deleted. If you have a task that's set up in the system to automatically execute any in-store batches that are date, because it's a date driven. So if you have it set up on the 29th, this batch will execute. You can also execute it manually. But if you don't want it to execute, a lot of people usually don't with the delete batch. They want to make sure that they have all the items. They want to make sure they've reviewed the batch before they delete a large group of items. You can set this date in the future. It's very simple to do. We just went through that. You can double click on there, pick a date farther in the future. You can also come and set the state to wait. And what that does is that this will put this batch into a wait. So it will not get executed when the task is run. You can manually execute it to get it to work. I generally like to do both. I always set it to wait, and then I set it a date farther in the future. So that way I make sure that I'm the one checking the batch and manually executing the batch, but either one will work. And then the same ideas applies as what I just went through with the other batch process. You need to bring up the items that you want to delete. So maybe you have an entire vendor that you're getting rid of. You're not going to carry their items anymore. Or you have a certain category of items that you're not going to carry anymore. You have a seasonal that you need to delete all those items. Whatever the case may be, you can bring those items all up into the browser. So I'm going to go ahead and say my vendor ID, and you can always double click in the field if you don't remember the vendor ID. And we're going to delete the Heinz baby food. We're not carrying these items anymore. They're discontinued. You hit OK, execute the filter, and it's going to bring up all the items down here that need to be deleted. When you're doing this, a delete batch, just bringing them up into the filter isn't enough. This isn't adding them to the batch. You need to create a table to add them to the batch. With delete batches, you're actually going to come up and you're going to create a future price. It won't let you do a future sale or future POS, anything like that. It's going to be a future price. So you're going to come up and you're going to do plus, and you're going to give it a price. And it doesn't really matter what the price is, because you're going to be deleting the item anyways. You're just giving it a price, so that way it's going to be added to the batch. If you're just deleting the one item, you can just hit apply changes. If you want everything in the filter to be brought into the delete batch, this is where you can use the apply templates to all items. You may be familiar with this if you use it in regular item maintenance. You click on this and it brings up the little pop-up, and it's giving you a check. Are you sure you want to delete all the items in the browser. It's telling you there's 39 items in the browser. Are you sure you want to make this change? You actually have to manually type in the word yes. And along with that, you also need to say how to apply it. Like the like codes, you can't just apply only changes. You are creating another table. You're creating a future price table that's attached to the item. So you need to do the apply only changes, but create record if needed. If you have used this in regular item maintenance, you have probably used the apply only changes with this, and that works on the live price table. But with the delete batch, we need to create that record. So you need to do apply only changes, but create record if needed. I happen to have my generate price turned on. I don't need to generate a price because I'm deleting those. I'm just going to hit never. And now all these items are in my new delete batch. I just gave them all a generic price of 1 because it truly doesn't matter. I'm going to delete the items. The items are going to be deleted at the end of this anyways. And then you can go and add another group of items if you need to with different criteria. If you have a different category, you can pull them up in the browser. If you have a different family code that you want to delete, you can pull them up in the browser. Another vendor that I'm not going to carry. So I'm not going to be carrying we're just going to say my HJ Heinz now as well. I'm getting rid of all of that. So I need to add these into the batch. Same thing would apply now that I have them in the browser. I can come up here, add them into the batch. We'll just give it a price. I always do $1. Don't have to do $1, just by habit. I'm going to click my icon to add all the items in the browser, hit yes. I know I need to apply only changes, but create the record because it's a future price table. And now all these items are going into the batch. If you notice SMS freezing when you do this, the larger the number of items you're adding at once, when you do that apply change, the longer it's going to take. It shouldn't take more than a few seconds unless you have a couple thousand items in there, but if you do notice it freezing for a second or two, that's why. Once I have all the items in my batch, if I want to see just the items in my batch, I can execute the filter on the delete batch. So that's this right here. And this will bring up all the items in just this batch. And now I can see what I'm going to delete. If you want to run a report before you delete the items, you can go into the batch, go into the execute in-store batch, and then there's my delete batch, and I want to view all my items that I'm going to delete. You can hit view, and here's a report that you can then print to keep for your records of all the items that you just deleted out of your system. Once you execute the batch, the items will be gone from the system, so you won't be able to do this after the fact. So if you want to have a record, this is definitely a step you want to make sure you're taking before you actually execute the batch. If you happen to be reviewing this and you say, I didn't actually mean to delete a few of these items as you're flipping through, printing it out, having a double set of eyes on it. I didn't mean to delete my bagel or my donut. They're not supposed to be in that vendor. You can always remove the items before you execute the batch. How you do that is you go back into our future batches, go into our delete batch. So we're just going to scroll down. This is a little scroll bar. So my delete batch was the last one I made. I'm going to execute that. These are those items right there. I did not mean to put those in my delete batch. They shouldn't have been under that vendor. So you can come up here, and what you're going to do to remove the item from the batch is delete the future price table for that item. You just do the little delete up there, hit yes, and this item will no longer be in the batch. It will not be deleted. You're deleting the record to not have it in the delete batch. And then I'm going to do the same thing with my donut. I'm going to delete just this future price record. I'm not deleting anything about the item. Hit yes. And now when I execute the filter on my batch, I do not have those items anymore. The last step then, after I'm sure that these are all items I want to delete, is I go up under batch, execute in store. I take that delete batch, I bring it over to the right-hand side, and I execute. Don't delete, that'll delete the batch. So you want to execute the batch, and then it'll make sure you want to execute all of those in there. You hit yes, and now those items are all going to be deleted from my system. Are there any questions that came in during that, Farrell?
Yes, thanks, Jen. One question we have here is, What's the correct way to delete an item without it using a delete batch if I only need to delete 1 or 2 items?
It's a good question. So just to delete one individual item or a couple individual items, if you don't need to delete a large group, you go into our maintenance and into our item maintenance, our regular item maintenance. You would put the barcode that you want to delete up here. I'm just going to go ahead and I'll just do my coffee since I just removed it from the delete batch, or no, I removed the bagel. So as you can see, this item has the 4 main tables attached to it: main, POS, price, and cost. The correct way to delete this is not to delete each individual table, because that can cause the orphans as well. You want to delete the main item table. You come up to the main item table and use the delete button from here. It's going to give you a warning. You're about to destroy the complete item. This will delete the item in all open windows. Are you sure you want to delete? So you want to make sure you have all the windows that have any sort of attachment to this item. And then you go ahead and click it on the main code and it will delete all of them. If you don't do it from the main table and you do it from the POS table, you're only going to delete this record. The item itself will remain. So if I come in and I delete the POS, it just deletes the POS record tied to that item, and the rest of them still exist. So you want to make sure you're deleting it from the main item table, and you want to make sure you have all the windows open that have any ties to that item so that they're all deleted properly and you don't have any orphans.
Okay, thanks, Jen.
Thanks.
And if anyone, wants to ask any questions, feel free to use the Q&A function at the bottom. Jen, can you reverse a delete batch? Say if you made a mistake, can you reverse it after you've executed it?
No. That's why we suggest that you run the report before you delete before you execute the delete batch, when you go into that execute in store, so that way you at least have a record of the items that you deleted. You do have a backup of your database that's taken nightly, and a backup of all of your item tables that are there that we can restore the information from if you need to do that. But it's not, you can't just find the batch and just undo it. It's best if you run that report at least so you have a record of the item. And then if you do need to restore, and it's a large amount of items specifically, it is something we can go and restore those tables from the backup and find those specific items if need be to restore them from there. But unfortunately, within the system, you can't just re-execute the batch to put it all back in place.
Okay, thanks, Jen. Another question that just came in. Is there a way to search out any orphans in order to delete them?
Yes, actually, there is. It's up here. If you are going to, I'm going to pull up my item maintenance screen again. So up there's a lot of good utilities and tools that are built into the system. But if you have your item maintenance screen open and there's item validity checks, and this will actually allow you to search a large number of things to check the validity of your information in your items, but specifically for those not found in POS or price table, not found in main item table, orphan and cost table. Those are the ones that will specifically tell you if there's some record missing. So an orphan and cost table means that there's a cost table that exists in my lab. So I'm going to have a lot of mistakes, a lot of different things in here. But I have just a cost table with nothing attached to it. Not found in POS or price means that they don't have a POS or price table. One of the two is missing. So you can start looking for those. And without a price or zero price means it either doesn't have a price table or the price is zero, which isn't always necessarily bad, but it does mean that, so you can see up here, I have no active prices on these items. It just means that the system is saying, hey, there's something wrong here, not so much something necessarily is missing, although it can completely be missing. There is a bunch of other utilities in here as well. I suggest going through here if you're looking for a good way to check the integrity of your database and the validity of your item maintenance. This is a great tool to use. And it was up under tools and item validity check. And just make sure you have your item maintenance screen because it will populate the items that meet the criteria in the browser over here.
Okay, thanks, Jen. Is there a limit to the amount of items you can include in a delete batch?
No, there's no limit. As
Okay,
many items as you would like to include in there. We usually recommend that you don't, if you're going to delete a large number of items, just to make sure that you're double checking it. Just because you are completely deleting the items from your system, I usually suggest that you narrow it down, like you're going to delete all the items in each department by department, just so that way you have a good batch of all the delete items in one department. You can have somebody double check there's no items in there that shouldn't be, because the larger the batch, just the more likely something slipped in there that shouldn't. But there is no limit if you want it to delete a very large number.
great. Thanks, Jen. It looks like I have two more here. Again, feel free to submit any additional questions at any time here in the Q&A. But the next question that came in, Jen, is there a journal or record that shows past delete batches?
There is a journal that does any item changes in the system. So if you come up, you can always search in the journal, and you can search for any item changes. But the tricky thing with delete batches is you can come in here, you can see the removal of all the tables in here. You are deleting the item, so this will show you some of the information, but because the item has been completely deleted from the system after you run that, it may not show all the information that you're looking for. But this is, you can always go through the logs and you can always go through the journals, and we can help you find those in the logs and journals. But for inside the system, this is the best way you can do that. So you come up under items, you want to make sure your action type, you're looking for remove. And then your date range, and leave your UPC range pretty open-ended, and then you can go ahead and run that. And that will show you all of them, all of the items that were in that delete batch.
Okay. Thanks, Jen. And last question, is there a way to make it so only specific access levels have the ability to delete items from the system?
Yes, we can lock that down by access level. So depending on what access level the operator is that's logged in, if they're a manager, if they're a owner, if they're a programmer, if you only want certain ones, you can lock down, it'll lock down not just the batches, you can lock down in the batch screen, sorry, but you can also lock it down in item maintenance. You can specify how much ability you want them to have. You can do delete, you can do if they want to be able to add, if they want to be able to change an item. You can lock down all that by access level. It's actually by each individual table that you do that by. So if you wanted to be able to not delete the POS price and cost table, we would go into each one and set that level, how much access that person has or that group of people have, because it's by level. And it's linked to the function, and we just have to set it. So if you don't want them to delete, add, we can set that up like that depending on the table. And it's something that we can help you with, that STCR Help Desk can help you with. You can call in and they can set that up on the functions for each table.
Okay. Perfect. It looks like that was all of our questions for today, Jen. Awesome job. Thank you so much for showing the group here best practices on delete batches. We'll be following up and sending out a recording to this for today's session. As always, if you have any questions, feel free to call our help desk at any time. And we have 2 more sessions through the end of the year. Our next session will be on November 30th at the same time. And that session is around coupons, best practices for setting them up. And then our last session for the year is December 22nd. It's our second session on self-checkout best practices. I hope you found today's session helpful and enjoyable, and hope you all have a good rest of your day. Thank you.
Thank you.